Chapter 83. The Range Rover finally rolled up in front of a sleek, wooden, glassed cabin that was built on the edge of a mountain bluff, spoiling us with exceptional views of a foggy Point Sur, serene and ethereally beautiful. Getting out of the car, I stretched my arms above my head and inhaled that earthy, damp, fresh air into my lungs. I listened to the deafening silence surrounding us. I turned to Marcos. It's just you and me, baby. We fell into each other's arms amongst those towering redwoods. This is perfect, I whispered, my arms around his taut waist. Are you happy? He asked, removing his shades, glancing down at me. Oh, so happy, I gushed, stepping up the wooden deck and running my hand along the glass walls, encasing the entire cabin. There's no keeping secrets in this place, that's for sure. Unlocking the door, Marcus quickly found the master suite, and with a cheeky look in his eye, he grabbed me, and we fell onto the bed, giggling like young lovers. We were ridiculous. Ah, bonita haro, he muttered, rolling his heavy body on top of mine. Wow, look at you. A whole week with you on my own, I grinned, holding his face within a gentle headlock. That's right, he nodded. You're stuck with me. Early in the evening, I cooked us a delicious candlelit dinner of pan-fried river trout with steamed asparagus. I stood in the kitchen, snickering to myself, watching Marcos, the brute, hauling wood in his burly arms, about to get the fire started in the pit outside. He probably can't remember the last time he lit a fire. And later, as the night had finally befallen us, the woods filled with a suffocating darkness, allowing us to become audience to black skies ablaze with thick blankets of shimmering stars bending over the violet belt of the Milky Way galaxy. Marcus and I lay soaking in the warm tub, our bodies entwined together, succumbing to the dark sky's galactic majesty. There was nowhere else on Earth I wanted to be. April talked with me yesterday, I murmured, hypnotized by the slow-burning embers out on the bluff. Marcus slowly caressed my chest through the pillowing steam. She talked with you? She talked with me, I said quietly. She said you were distant with her and didn't touch her anymore. Marcus inhaled deep, continuing to stroke me gently. A long, lethargic silence ensued. She said that you said everything's fine. Well, you and I both know better, he softly murmured. Yes, but she doesn't know that, I pointed out, or she doesn't want to believe that. And she thinks you're having an affair. I'm having a life. That's what I'm having. She's been suspecting something for a while now, I muttered, sliding my wrinkled foot along the edge of his calf muscle. More silence. It's getting harder for me to be in that house with her, he sighed heavily. Oh, I know, baby, I said gently, putting a sympathetic head on his shoulder. The house is dense. We lay there watching our chests rise and fall on the surface of the hot water. I want a divorce, Marcus blurted out. Startled, I sat up and glared at him, watching him calculate his words. Marcus Almeida is not playing right now. His words were like music to my ears. I want a divorce, but now is not the time, he said, pulling me close to him. I've got to close this deal with China. I don't need the added stress. And what about Henry? I wondered. Well, that's the hardest part, he muttered softly. I would never have left his mother when he was so little. But now he's old enough to decide what he wants to do, who he wants to live with. I sighed deeply, snuggling back down onto his chest. Everything will happen when it's meant to. Marcus pulled my chin up against his, gazing at me with those heavy, haunting eyes, and delicately kissed my moist lips. Everything has happened as it was meant to. Chapter 84. It was the most wonderfully beautiful week with Marcos. We hiked through the parks, had a picnic down the beach, and even visited the Maiden one night, having a few beers with the local folk. But just because we were living the dream didn't mean Marcos had forgotten all about his multi-billion-dollar empire. Because, hey, Marcos was still, in fact, Mr. Marcos Almeida, CEO of the Almeida Group, and God knows what else. So, in amongst our lazy breakfasts, bath soaks, and long hours of lovemaking, his sporadic business dealings commanded his presence 24 hours a day, and I quickly adjusted. I became a total pro at setting up Skype conferences for him on a whim, and even learned how to use the satellite phone. I wanted to make his life easier, and I felt privileged to have so much of his time all to myself. On Sunday morning, I woke up with the bright sun screaming through my eyes, watching Marcos, who was well awake, pacing back and forth barefoot along the deck outside. He had one hand in the pocket of his sweats, and the other talking on the satellite phone, glancing out into the horizon. I could stare at him all day long. Man hard at work. Several minutes later, he peered through the glass and noticed me propped up against the pillows. I gave him a little wave. He smiled and eventually entered the cabin. Yeah, good work, Lucas. I'll call you soon. Marcos closed the phone and climbed on top of me. I could feel his skin crawling with exhilaration. My lady, he kissed me deeply. Good morning. I wiped the hair out of his face as he stared me down. Good morning, puppy. Fancy a trip to China? He blurted out excitedly. What? My eyes almost fell out of my head. Something big has gone down. China? I stammered, sitting up in the bed. Yeah, Marcus smiled, smiling so wide that it almost broke his jaw. When? In a couple of hours, he answered casually, pulling me back down into the bed. What? What the fuck? Oh my God, I gasped. What happened? Fuzan and I have come to an agreement regarding the railway line, Marcus explained. And with the Chinese ministry's approval, plus Solokov already on board, Zan's invited Solokov and I to Shanghai to sign the full contract. Oh my God. Oh, Marcos, honey. Oh my God, congratulations. I jumped into his arms, absolutely thrilled for him. Zan's out here in Vegas. I got him those ringside seats for that boxing fight at the MGM Grand last night, he said. So we'll collect him and Arthur Lim in Vegas on the way out. Fuck. This was serious. I was hardly packed to be greeting any Chinese high rollers. Who is this Fuzan? I wondered with intrigue. A Chinese businessman. A solid one. You mean a billionaire like you? I smirked with a hint of mockery. Yes, Marcus said flatly, shooting me a scornful glance. Well, I hope this Mr. Fu likes the Big Sur look, I muttered, glancing across at my jeans and flannel shirts hanging over the sofa. Marcus grabbed my face affectionately. We'll fix that when we get there. And besides, there's decent clothes on the jet. Marcus already has woman's clothes on the jet? I frowned. Whose Oh no. Light bulb moment. No, I begged him. Please, honey, no, not April's clothes. I did not want to be wearing that bitch's clothes, no matter how designer or fabulous they were. Marcus gave me a pleading look, glancing at my jeans and flannel shirt sorrowfully. No pun intended, but they weren't going to fly for an occasion like this. Oh, okay. I sighed reluctantly. I'll do it for you. Good girl. Marcus squeezed me into his chest. I wiped my hands over my bewildered face. Well, I better get packing. Marcus was immediately back on the sat phone. Make arrangements for Shanghai. 11? Okay, good. So, baby, I said, shoving our things in our bags. We're flying out at 11? Yes, Marcus answered, busy dialing another number. I was confused. It would take more than a few hours to get our shit together and haul some serious ass back down that coast highway. So, are we driving back down to Santa Barbara? Marcus shook his head, putting the phone up to his ear. No, we drive to Monterey. The jet will meet us there. The convenient life of a billionaire. No waiting in lines at the airport, and certainly no interrogating airport security. You walk straight in through the gate, get on the plane, and fuck off pronto. Chapter 85. By 10 a.m., we piled our bags in the back seat of the Range and zoomed down that steep mountain track, winding through those towering redwoods and quickly turning back onto the Cabrillo highway. Marcus in the driver's seat put a heavy foot on the gas, plowing up that road. I eyeballed him. Now this type of driving turned me the hell on. So, me the wild driver, huh? I smirked, the mild sun melting through the sunroof. Marcus shot me that smile that would melt 1,000 hearts. I'm efficient, he said, showing me those flawless teeth and dimples. I can't deal. My other iPhone quickly buzzed. I glanced across at the screen. April. Trust her to kill the moment. I was in no mood to talk to her. So, I didn't. We rolled into Monterey Airport just before 11 a.m., with Marcus swiftly parking the Range Rover at the terminal. I didn't even bother asking him how it would get back to Montecito. I knew by now that everything was always taken care of with Marcus Almeida. And ever the consistent gentleman, Marcus took our bags and walked straight toward the entrance, where we were greeted by not 3, but now 5 of those beefheads from his security detail, and looking ever so pleased to see us. Understatement of the century. They escorted us through the gate and straight through the door, ignoring the curious onlookers that were filming and taking pictures at the window. I didn't understand why until I stepped outside. Now let me just say right here, I know Marcus has serious wealth, but I think it only really sunk in for me when I saw what was waiting for us out on the airstrip. Gleaming on that black tarmac was an enormous giant, a Boeing 747-8 private jet, with its 4 monster engines slowly turning over. I stopped mid-stride, trying to gather myself, absorbing its sleek magnificence in the mid-morning sun. And this is where I reiterate regarding Marcus's apparent net worth. I know $16 billion is a fuck you amount of wealth, as publicly speculated by Forbes on more than many occasions. But I was convinced Marcus was worth a lot more. The image of those stacked up bars of gold and platinum bullion in that vault bled through the crevices of my blown away mind. Marcus peered over his shoulder at me, the cool wind dancing through his hair. "You okay?" "Yes," I exclaimed, quickly catching up to him. "I'm okay." To hell was I okay. "Come on, baby." He winked at me. "Let's go." A line of pilots and staff stood politely beside the air stairs, shaking Marcus's hand. I counted 3 pilots, 6 stewardesses, and 8 men in sharp suits I had never seen before, clutching heavy leather briefcases and chatting on their cell phones. And of course, I quickly spotted Lucas and Philippe, also busy on their phones. Now, admittedly, it was a bit of a circus, and my first real taste at seeing the other side of Marcus Almeida. I must have looked like a hot side in my flannels and jeans. Marcus took my hand in front of everyone and helped me climb into that massive, decked-out aircraft. I mean, the Gulfstream was something, but this jet was in a whole league of its own. And really, I'm not one to be overtly impressed by material things, but this jet was an airborne palace, kitted out with a luxurious stateroom, assorted lounge areas, a dining room with a full bar, an office, and even beds on the upper deck. Within minutes of boarding, we took off up over Monterey and headed for Las Vegas. And it wasn't before long that various people were quickly coming up to Marcus, requesting his immediate attention. "I have to go and do some work," Marcus muttered in my ear quietly. "Let the stewardess show you into the stateroom and find an outfit." "Okay." I watched as he got up and disappeared from the lounge. A stewardess immediately came and showed me to the stateroom. I shut the door and fumbled through the closet. April never ever lacked style, but I cringed at having to wear her clothes. I settled for a black Dolce & Gabbana lace organza tie-neck top, which I tucked into a pair of white cinque de sept wide-leg pants and finished it with a set of classic black Louboutin pumps. It was a stunning outfit. It was a miracle that I could even fit into her clothing now. I rubbed some lip gloss over my mouth and brushed my hair back into a chignon bun. Suddenly the door burst open and Marcus walked in. He smiled at me, shutting the door quickly. "Doesn't matter what you wear, you're lovely," he muttered, pulling me close to him. "Thank you." The captain's voice came over the speaker. "Marcus, ladies and gentlemen, please prepare for a descent." Time was of the essence. Marcus quickly tore off his Big Sur clothes and slipped into a sleek black dress shirt and trousers, while I grabbed a comb and tidied his hair, slicking it back in its usual debonair style. We could have totally passed as a married couple at that moment. Chapter 86. We touched down on the tarmac of McCarran International and were greeted by 2 stretch limos full of Chinese men. Marcus duly got off the jet with everyone else, and after the official meets and greets, they immediately reboarded the jet and were naturally very impressed. It did all the talking for Marcus, let's just put it that way. Marcus, along with a translator, introduced me to this elusive Mr. Fu Zan, a petite and slender man no more than 5'6". And of course, accompanying him was the sophisticated Arthur Lim, with his navy framed glasses and eccentric style of dress, whom I had seen on the cover of Forbes alongside Marcos. I knew by the scope of things I would not be seeing so much of Marcos on this flight, and I completely understood why. All the men disappeared into the dining room and were gone for hours as we flew over the North Pacific Ocean. I spent those hours glancing out over the long stretching deep blue, watching the clouds pass us by, flipping through some magazines, and of course, thinking about Marcos. Here I was on a ridiculous private jet with my boss, whom I was totally besotted with, heading to China because he asked me. I often think about where I would be had I not taken this job. I'd probably still be waking up at 6:30 a.m. to the sounds of Massey thumping around her house on Iliff. And really, I have Massey to thank for all of this, much to her own dismay. I don't know if it was because of all the excitement of going to China, or just simply getting caught up in all the fuss aboard the jet, but I grew sleepy and headed to the stateroom for a nap. Later, I awoke to Marcos gently stroking my face. I peered up at him and felt a smile run over my lips. He sat on the edge of the bed, looking at me endearingly. "How long have you been here?" I muttered, retucking myself into April's clothes. "A few minutes," he grinned. "Dinner is being served in the dining room." "Okay," I nodded, sitting up and fixing my hair. "You've slept for hours," Marcos laughed. "Really?" "We'll be landing in Shanghai in 4 hours." "Oh my God," I mumbled, rubbing my face, feeling embarrassed that I had slept for so long. Must be this jet. "How's business, puppy?" Kneeling on the bed, I pulled Marcos toward me and massaged his shoulders. "Good," he said through his moaning and groaning as I worked my fingers into his tan body. "Oh, everyone's happy. That's good." I leaned over his shoulders and kissed him. We walked out together and made our way to the dining room, nodding at the mixture of Chinese and Western faces scampering around the jet. It was wild. "Just bow when you see them," Marcos muttered in my ear. "Okay." I could hear the dining room full of Chinese voices and laughter. As they saw us walk in, they all immediately stood to their feet and bowed. And I too bowed like I was told. "Ni hao," I smiled, trying out my Chinese. "Very smooth, Bonnie." They all gasped warmly and chuckled, bowing again immediately. It was so funny. Marcos rubbed his hand on my back, laughing with them. They were the nicest people. Chapter 87. We sat down to a 3-course dinner, and I took it upon myself to just quietly observe the surroundings, being the silent, polite company Marcos needed. Every now and then, I would feel his hand on my thigh, and he would give it a small, tender squeeze. We touched down at 6:30 p.m. Shanghai time. Talk about entering another world. We were swiftly whisked away in a line of blacked-out Mercedes and taken straight to the hotel, the Mandarin Oriental Pudong, the presidential suite. I had never, ever seen such opulence dripping from a hotel room in my life. And it was hardly a room. Had to be over at least 8,000 square feet. "Wow," I gasped walking in, admiring the gorgeous skyline along the Bund, watching the concierge briskly take our bags through the suite. "Lucky us." Marcos fell into my arms. "This isn't your tab?" I said, nursing his tired head. Marcus shook his head. Just like Marcos, this Mr. Fuzan was obviously a very generous man also, splashing out on quite possibly the most expensive suite in Shanghai. Heck, probably in China. And he ought to, after Marcus flew him out to the biggest boxing fight of the year, shouting him to the best seats, which were probably over $300,000 apiece. Peeling off his jacket, I took Marcus in my arms and fell onto the soft, comfy bed. What a day. Technically, it was about 1 a.m. California time, and Marcus was totally exhausted. I pulled the rest of his body out of his clothes and slipped him and myself into the complimentary silk kimonos. You look the part now, I laughed at Marcus. Welcome to China. He turned his phone off, leaving it on the bedside table, and together we crawled into the glossy grey marble bathtub. I rubbed his temples, nursing his head on my chest, and wrapped my tan, slender legs around him. Have you had a good day? He asked me softly. I have had the most surreal day, I smiled. Who would have thought? Morning in Big Sur, nighttime in Shanghai. Oh my gosh, that's so crazy. Tomorrow's a big day, my lady, he sighed as I slowly rubbed soap across his broad chest, gazing out over the Shanghai skyline. There'll be a lot of media when we sign this contract. Be ready for it. Are you nervous? No, he said quietly. But you know I don't like publicity, especially reporters. I just need to get through that part. And after, Zan has invited us to dinner. Oh? Where to? I asked. I have no idea, muttered Marcos. I laughed. That could be scary. I've got to find some decent clothes tomorrow. Where on earth do you shop in Shanghai? A smirk fell across Marcos's lips. I've sorted it for you already. I furrowed a brow, peering down at his face curiously, running my hand along his forehead. You've sorted it? Mm-hmm. He smiled with closed eyes. You'll see. I never did like surprises, but I've learned to love them with Marcos. As I lay there, in between the crisp bed sheets that night, holding a sleeping Marcos in my arms, I became engulfed within the odd noises of Shanghai. I silently studied the dazzling neon skyline quietly, totally lost in thought. My attention was soon brought back to Marcos, watching his chest fill and deflate with air. I gently rubbed the side of his sleeping face, staring at him. Take away all the glitz and glamour, the money and the power. I couldn't imagine my life without Marcos Almeida. I felt at that very moment we would be together forever.